The burden of war, understanding the human cost. In the distant future, humanity has spread throughout the galaxy, encountering a variety of alien species. Many of these species have long viewed humanity as primitive, violent, and ultimately inconsequential. Their technologies and methods of warfare are seen as crude, clumsy, and barbaric compared to the advanced species they coexist with in the stars. However, when a conflict erupts between humanity and a powerful alien alliance, the perception begins to change. What the aliens do not understand, and what humanity has tragically perfected, are the concepts of war crimes and the moral weight that humans carry in battle. The story centers around a Marine, a hardened combat veteran named Sergeant Evelyn Blake, who has witnessed the horrors of war firsthand. During a confrontation with an alien force, Blake is captured and interrogated. In a tense conversation with an alien leader, she is forced to explain what war crimes are, concepts that are alien to the captors, who view victory as a pure, unblemished triumph and are unaccustomed to the idea of holding oneself back in the pursuit of enemy defeat. Blake's task is to not only survive the interrogation but to explain to them the depth of human suffering, the moral boundaries humanity places on its own actions, and the tragic consequences of crossing those lines. She must convey why humans engage in the war crimes they do, why they fight for more than just survival, and the complex web of honor, shame, and psychological trauma that defines human combat. The narrative weaves together brutal combat scenes, philosophical debates, and explorations of humanity's dark legacy, culminating in a shift of perspective among the aliens that will forever change their view of humanity. Act 1. The Preconception of Humanity. 1. The Encounter. 2. 1. Introduction of the alien species. The story opens with an alien race, the Zahlari, a technologically advanced species with no concept of mercy or forgiveness in warfare. Their culture has evolved through constant conquest, and they are proud of their unrelenting nature. 2. The First Clash. The Zahlari invade a human colony on a distant planet, expecting quick and easy domination. Their advanced technology, fleets, and weapons are unmatched. They believe humans are primitive and beneath them. 3. Introduction of Sergeant Evelyn Blake. Sergeant Blake is stationed on the front lines, and her unit is tasked with defending the colony. Despite the humans' technological inferiority, Blake's unit fights back with a mix of raw ingenuity and old-fashioned brutality. However, they are overwhelmed and eventually forced to retreat. 4. The Capture. Blake's unit is captured after a fierce firefight. She is taken prisoner by the Zahlari forces. 3. Alien perception of humans. 4. 1. Interrogation. Blake is interrogated by the Zahlari General, Commander Corrin. The alien commander mocks her for humanity's crude weapons and illogical tactics. He asks questions about human warfare, taunting her for what they consider senseless violence. 2. Understanding the basics. Blake explains human tactics, the human need for victory, and what drives humans to fight so fiercely. The Zahlari are intrigued but largely dismissive. They can't understand why humans would willingly engage in such brutal conflict, given their technological inferiority. The Interrogation Room. Sergeant Evelyn Blake sat in the cold, sterile chamber of the Zahlari warship. The hum of energy shields reverberated through the metal walls, but to her, the world felt oddly silent. The long hours of captivity had worn on her. She could feel her muscles stiffening from the cramped posture in the chair, the pain of being immobilized pressing on her every joint. Her fatigues were torn from the firefight, her skin still sticky with the remnants of the dust and sweat of battle. But the physical discomfort wasn't what weighed most heavily on her mind. It was the quiet, persistent dread of what was to come. Commander Corrin's sharp mandibles clicked as he circled her, his multifaceted eyes studying her with an intensity that would have made anyone else squirm. The Zahlari weren't accustomed to restraint or mercy. Their people had never needed to distinguish between just and unjust warfare. To them, war was war, an essential part of life. The strongest, the most cunning, and the most efficient survived. Simple. Blake could see that Corrin was trying to understand humanity, to decipher the puzzle that was human warfare. But he didn't understand the first thing about it. So, Corrin began, his voice rasping like sandpaper, "Your species, these humans, you claim to fight wars with a set of rules?" His words dripped with skepticism. "Rules that govern when, where, and how you kill your enemies?" He paused, seemingly amused by his own question. "Why?" Blake's face was expressionless, though her pulse quickened. The answer wasn't simple, not by a long shot. She had seen things, terrible things. Things that haunted her in ways that nothing, not even the fiercest battle, ever could. But she'd long ago made peace with the fact that some questions didn't have simple answers. And if she was to survive this interrogation, she would need to explain the depth of humanity's internal conflict. No, she began slowly, carefully choosing her words. We don't have rules to make war easier. We have rules because without them, war becomes something worse than destruction. Corin's mandibles twitched, a sign that he was confused. Blake could tell that the concept of restraint in warfare was foreign to him, even repellent. For a creature like him, who thrived on pure combat, on the art of conquest, the idea of self-imposed boundaries in a battlefield must have sounded utterly illogical. Are you suggesting that you, Corin's voice almost cracked with disbelief, that you are choosing to make war harder for yourselves? Blake straightened, the fatigue of the interrogation starting to give way to a deeper, quiet anger. The thought of what she was about to explain made her stomach twist, but it was necessary. She knew it was her only chance to make Corin see that humanity's moral struggle wasn't a weakness. It was a burden, one that the Zahlari could never understand but one that defined them. Yes, Blake said, her voice growing more resolute. We have rules because we understand that war is not just about survival. It's about who we are when it's over. And even when we fight, we have to remain human. If we lose that, we lose everything. Explain this, Corin demanded, his voice now sharp with frustration, as if he could not fathom what she meant. What are these rules that you speak of? Your soldiers, your generals, they choose not to fight with every weapon at their disposal? Why? Blake took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment, forcing herself to recall the things she had seen, the things she had done. The images came unbidden. Civilians caught in the crossfire, villages razed to the ground, children lost in the wreckage of battles. She shuddered, trying to push those memories back down. There's a line, Corin. A line we won't cross even if it means our own defeat. We call it war crimes? Her voice hardened with the weight of the words, like stones she was forced to carry. Humanity understands the destruction war brings. But we also know the destruction that comes from intentionally harming civilians, or using weapons that cause undue suffering. We have a moral code. A set of principles that say no matter how desperate we get, we can't lose sight of what makes us human. The alien general was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. Blake watched him carefully, waiting for the inevitable question. What do you mean by war crimes? Corin finally asked, his voice slow, as though he were trying to wrap his mind around an idea that was inherently foreign to him. This term, it doesn't make sense. Blake sighed deeply, her eyes briefly scanning the room. There was so much to explain, but she couldn't afford to get lost in the details. She had to make him understand quickly. It means we don't use chemical weapons that burn a person from the inside out. We don't use biological weapons that could wipe out entire species in a matter of days. We don't target civilians to break the will of an enemy. We don't, she hesitated. The memories of a particularly brutal campaign flooded her thoughts. We don't use certain kinds of torture, even when prisoners would give us valuable intelligence. Because that destroys us. Corin's multifaceted eyes narrowed. So, these crimes, are they acts of weakness? You do not think you can win by doing these things? No, Blake replied, a deep sadness in her voice. We win by being better than the other side. We win by holding on to our humanity. If we let ourselves become monsters, we lose. If we let the war make us forget what's worth fighting for, then what are we fighting for in the first place? The tension in the room was palpable. Corin looked at her as though seeing her for the first time, not as a mere enemy soldier to be crushed, but as a representation of something strange, something unsettling. He blinked and his mandibles clicked nervously. You fight, to preserve your soul? Blake nodded solemnly, unable to hide the weariness in her eyes. Yes, because if we lose that, we lose everything. Corin was silent for a long time. It was as if the weight of her words had struck something deep within him, something he had never known to question. The question of whether victory was worth the cost of one's soul. Was it possible to conquer and remain pure? Blake didn't think so. She could feel it in her bones. Finally, Corin spoke again, his voice softer, almost tentative. And you have rules for this restraint? For this morality? Blake's lips tightened into a thin line. We do. And we break them. Over and over again. But we keep trying. Because even when we fail, we know what it costs. And we know that some things are worse than death. In this expanded section, I've tried to build a tense dialogue between Blake and Corin, making the alien commander challenge her beliefs and forcing her to explain why humanity maintains its moral boundaries in warfare. The psychological weight of explaining war crimes in a context where such concepts don't exist is meant to highlight the complexity of the human struggle in combat.